class what we have studied in frequency response. Frequency response is used. I कोई स्पेशल तुम लोग को परमिशन लोगों को देनी पड़ी थी तब बैठने के लिए सब कुछ है इतना पीछे क्यों बैठे हो सामने तीनों बैठ के आसानी प्लीज कम so frequency response is one of the most important topic in process control. Frequency response is part of the process control syllabus primarily because there is something which cannot be done without frequency. So you will not be able to find out the stability of the control system with date time accurately without frequency response. And that is the reason why frequency response is at all is a part of process control. Okay. So in the last class we have started looking at frequency response. So frequency response is nothing but what? Whenever we are giving a sinusoidal input to the system, how my system is going to behave under the sinusoidal input. That is what we are trying to analyze in a frequency. Okay. So I will only summarize whatever we have done in the extra class. So what we have said is, if there is a let's say first order process and if we give a sinusoidal input to the first order process, then we can find out how the ultimate response is going to be when t tends to infinity. So by solving a complicated derivation like this, we have finally obtained this particular equation. And what this particular equation is telling us? This equation is telling us that the ultimate response is going to be sustained sine wave with the same frequency as that of input. That is the conclusion number 1. Conclusion number 2 is the amplitude ratio is given as kp divided by under root tau p square omega square plus 1. And the phase angle is given by tan inverse of minus omega tau. Okay. So now these three things which we have obtained from the first order process. The argument what we had in the last class is all these three conclusions we can get directly by replacing s equals to j omega. You don't need to go for a complicated derivation which we have done. Okay, you can just replace s by j omega in the transfer function. You can replace s by j omega in a transfer function and then find out the magnitude of j omega. That will directly give you the amplitude ratio. And similarly, the phase angle will be obtained as tan inverse of imaginary part of j omega divided by real part of j omega. Okay. So we don't need to go through a complex derivation which we have done. This derivation is given only to illustrate that finally you are getting the same equation. That's what we are trying to prove. Okay. So that is what we have seen in the last class. We can replace s by j omega in this equation. See, this is the equation here. S we can replace by j omega, and then after that we can find out the magnitude of j omega. We are directly getting the amplitude ratio, which is nothing but kp divided by under root tau p square omega square plus 1. Okay. Similarly, the phase angle can be directly obtained as tan inverse of imaginary part of j omega divided by real part of j omega. So in this case, we are getting tan inverse of minus omega tau for a first order. The second question which we asked is whether these results are generalized, isn't it? The answer for that is that whatever the results we have obtained here, all these results are generalized results as long as the process is stable. And that derivation also we have done in the last class. So if you are having a generalized process with a transfer function g of s, we can actually derive that whatever the results we have obtained are actually the generalized results as long as the process is stable. Okay. So this is what we have seen. Then we have seen several processes and how the amplitude ratio and phase angle is going to vary for pure capacity process. Then if there are n non-interacting processes in series, in that case how the phase angle and amplitude ratio will be there. Also for a second order system, date, time, proportional controller, PI controller and PID controller, all these expressions we have seen in the last. Okay, up to this we have done in the last extra class, makeup class which we had, etc. Okay. Okay. Now what we are going to look at is today is Bode plots. Remember I said frequency response can be analyzed easily using Bode plots. There are two types of Bode plots. The first Bode plot is when we are plotting amplitude ratio versus frequency. That is plot number 1. There is another Bode plot which is phase angle is plotted versus frequency. And the frequency is varying between 0 to infinite. And in order to cover this entire range, typically amplitude ratio versus frequency is plotted in log plot. When I am saying log plot, what it means is axis is given in log scale, y-axis is also given in a log scale, values are not given in log, values are actual values, scale is log. I don't know whether you have seen log plot. Have you seen? In fluid mechanics you might have seen, isn't it? In fluid mechanics there is a plot which is Reynolds number versus friction factor, correct? Moody's friction factor. So that plot is given in a log scale. So similar plot we will be seeing here. Okay. So now let's look at let's start with a simple first order process. So first order process we have a amplitude ratio given as Kp divided by under root 1 plus tau p square omega square. This we have already derived. Okay. Now in this particular equation, let's take AR by Kp. If I take AR by Kp, what I am going to get? I am going to get 1 upon under root 1 plus tau p square omega square. If I take a log of this, log of AR by Kp, what I am going to get? I am going to get minus 1 by 2 log 1 plus tau p square omega square. Okay. Now let's look at two limiting cases. First limiting case is where omega tends to 0. When omega tends to 0, omega is a frequency. When omega tends to 0, what will happen to this first term, second term? This second term will be very close to 0. So actually what we are going to get? We are going to get minus 1 by 2 log of 1. What will be log of 1? 0. So we will get log AR by Kp will be equal to 0. So when we get log of a particular function is 0, what it means? That function should be equal to 1. So AR by Kp should be equal to 1. So this particular line which is giving you AR by Kp equals to 1 is called as low frequency asymptote. This is referred as low frequency asymptote. Similarly, there is a high frequency asymptote. All these terminologies are very important. You will see these terminologies we are going to use in plotting the Bode plots. Okay. When we are saying high frequency asymptote, what it means? It means that omega tends to infinite. When omega tends to infinite, what will happen to this term? This term will be dominating over 1. So we will have minus 1 by 2 log of tau p square omega square. So that 2 will come out here. So that minus this 1 by 2 will get cancelled out with this square term here. So we will have minus log of omega tau p. Isn't it? Correct. So this is what we are getting. So what is the slope here? Minus 1. You can see the slope is minus 1. So whenever we have a high frequency asymptote and whenever I am plotting amplitude ratio versus omega, the slope of that line is going to be minus 1 when I am having a first order process. Okay. Now let's look at a phase angle. Let's look at a phase angle. What is the phase angle given for a first order process? First order process phase angle phi is given as tan inverse of minus omega tau. Isn't it? When omega tends to 0, what will be the value? Tan inverse of 0. Tan inverse of 0 is 0. So that means when omega tends to 0, your phase angle is 0. And when omega tends to infinity, you get tan inverse of minus infinity. So tan inverse of minus infinity is minus 90. Minus 90. So that's what you are getting, minus 90. So now these two informations we are using in plot. Okay, let's look at the first term. Here, when omega tends to 0, I am having AR by KT equals to 1. So that is what we have shown here. See, this AR by KT is plotted versus omega tau p. So you can see that this particular line is actually starting from 1. So this horizontal line dashed line is referred as low frequency asymptote. Isn't it? And when omega tends to infinity, in that case, the slope of this AR by KT versus tau p omega should be minus 1. So that is this line. So you can see slope is minus 1. That's what you are getting here. Log of AR by KT minus 1 is there. This slope is minus 1. Okay, another thing to note down here. You can look at the scale here. What is the scale? Scale is starting from 0.001, 0.01, 0.11, and after that the number will be 10. It's a log scale. It's a log scale. Similarly, look at the x-axis. 0.11, 10. It is also a log scale. So here, the graph is represented in log scale, but the values are actual values. Okay. So amplitude ratio, AR by KT equals to 1. That's what I am showing here. Okay. So this is the Bode plot number 1. Plot number 2. Again, there is one more important term here. This is a corner frequency. Now, what is corner frequency? So corner frequency is a frequency corresponding to a point where both the low frequency asymptote and high frequency asymptote meet. Okay. Now when I am saying low frequency asymptote is meeting with a high frequency asymptote, what it means here? It means that these two terms are actually equal. Remember, when I am having a low frequency asymptote, in that case this one is dominating over the other. When I am having the high frequency asymptote, the second term is dominating over the first one. And when I am saying both these asymptotes are meeting with each other, what it means is both these terms should be equals to 1. So tau p square omega square should be equals to 1. So that means what? Omega r will be 1 by tau p. So omega r equals to 1 by tau p is nothing but a corner frequency. Please note that in this course there are 4 types of frequency. Okay, these are commonly asked questions in the interview. There is a corner frequency, there is a crossover frequency, there is a resonant frequency. Okay, so all these, there is a natural frequency, and all these frequencies have a different meaning. They are not same. Okay, corner frequency is a frequency where this tau p square omega square is equals to 1. So this is nothing but what? When the contribution of this is the point at which low frequency asymptote and a high frequency asymptote is meeting with each other. That's a corner. Okay. Crossover frequency is a frequency at which crossover frequency is a frequency at which your phase angle becomes minus 180. We will come back. This particular term is very, very important. When we will look at Bode stability criteria, we will again come back to crossover frequency. There is something called as a resonant frequency. We will again see the resonant frequency. Okay. So is it clear? Corner frequency is clear to everyone? Corner frequency is a frequency where low frequency asymptote and a high frequency asymptote meets. Okay. So in a way, this particular term should be equal to plotting the Bode plots is easy. Why? The first step is you have to first find out the corner frequency. First find out the corner frequency, then draw a straight line with amplitude ratio equals to 1, and then draw another line with a slope of -1. You will directly get a rough sketch of a Bode plot, and then plot a solid line which is kind of touching both these asymptotes. That's it. That is the Bode plot, isn't it? So this is the Bode plot for the first order plot. This is the Bode plot for a first order. Now look at the second plot here. This is the second Bode plot. In the second Bode plot, we are plotting phase angle versus frequency. Phase angle versus frequency. Now in this plot there is a difference. You can see that y-axis is varying as 0, -45, -90. So y-axis is in an actual scale. So it's a semi-log plot. So second Bode plot is a semi-log plot. There is a y-axis which is in the actual scale, whereas the x-axis is in the log scale, and both the plots should have the same x-axis. So both these plots are corresponding to each other. I will explain how. Now remember, when omega tends to 0, which is a low frequency asymptote, my phase angle is 0. My phase angle is 0. Remember, in this case, the phase angle comes out to be, when omega tends to 0, phase angle is 0. So we are starting from 0 here. We are starting from 0 here. And when omega tends to infinity, my phase angle is -90. So I am reaching to this -90. But should I connect a straight line from this particular point to this point? Why I have drawn a sigmoidal curve here? Why I have drawn a sigmoidal curve? I should have drawn a straight line with it. Yes, no? So you can see that you can find out what will be the phase angle here. What will be the phase angle here? At the middle point. So this is the middle point at which omega tau p equals to 1. That's the corner point. Isn't it? So omega tau p equals to 1. So tan inverse of minus omega tau p is what? Tan inverse of -1. And tan inverse of -1 is -2. So that's why this angle should be -45. So this -45 has to coincide directly with this corner point. So you have to draw both these plots one after another, and here the values are corresponding to each other. They are not drawn separately. They are drawn together. Okay? Is it clear to everyone how to draw the Bode plot? In fact, our tutorial number 12 is on this only. How to draw a Bode plot and solve the example based on that. Okay, let's move our discussion to another process. Pure capacitive process. Pure capacitive process will have a transfer function of Kp divided by S. If you replace S by j omega and find out g of j omega, magnitude of that, it comes out to be Kp by omega. Isn't it? So that's what we are getting. Amplitude ratio comes out to be Kp by omega. This is what we have proven here. This is the pure capacitive process. Yes, you can replace by j omega, and then this is the real part, this is the imaginary part. You can find out the amplitude. Amplitude comes out to be Kp by omega. Correct? And phase angle comes out to be -90. Now let's look at. So Kp by omega and phase angle is -90. Phase angle -90 is always constant. It's not varying. So how we can plot a Bode plots here? So you can see that if I plot AR by Kp versus omega in this particular plot, you can see that AR by Kp versus omega, if I plot, I will get a straight line with a. So you can see that AR by Kp is inversely proportional to omega. Isn't it? So you get a straight line with a slope -1. Correct? Similarly, the phase angle is remaining at -90. That's it. Okay, correct. Important point is that omega equals to 1, your amplitude ratio should be matching 1. When omega is 1, AR by Kp should be equal to 1. So that's why this omega equals to 1 value is shown here. Okay, is it clear to everyone? Now this is an interesting case. This is slightly more interesting case. Okay. So far, Bode plots, plotting the Bode plots was really easy for first order process and fuel capacity process. Let's look at a second order process. So second order process amplitude ratio is given by Kp divided by under root 1 minus tau p square omega square whole square plus 2 zeta tau omega square. Isn't it? This is what the term we have derived. This we have also derived in tutorial number 6. Okay. The same expression we have derived in the tutorial number 6. Again, phase angle is given by tan inverse of minus 2 zeta tau omega divided by 1 minus tau square omega. Now let's apply the same law. Let's apply the same logic. Take AR by Kp and take a log of that. So log AR by Kp comes out to be minus 1 by 2 log of 1 minus tau square omega square whole square plus 2 zeta tau omega square. Okay, this is what we have obtained by taking a log of AR by Kp. Okay. Now in this particular case, if I put omega tends to 0, what will happen? If I put omega tends to 0, then omega tends to 0, this particular term is 0, this term is also 0, so you will get log of 1, log of 1 is 0, so you will have log AR by Kp will be equal to 0, 0, that means AR by Kp should be equal to 1. So low frequency asymptote in this case will start from AR by Kp equals to 1. Let's look at the another case where omega tends to infinite. If you put omega tends to infinite in this case, then this particular term is going to dominate over all other terms. This term is going to dominate over all other terms. So what I am going to get? Tau omega raised to the power 4, and if I take a log of that, that 4 will come out here. So we will have a slope of minus 2. So that means when we are having a second order process, the high frequency asymptote should make an angle of minus 2. Isn't it? Okay. Alright. So in this particular case, the slope should be minus 2. Now the important point is when we had a first order process, what was the slope? Minus 1. When we had a second order process, the slope will be minus 3. Let's say if we will have a third order process, what will be the slope? Minus 3. Okay. So you can generalize. Alright? Okay. So we can plot this again in this particular case, what will be the Palmer frequency? This tau omega should be equal to 1. In that case, the Palmer frequency will be 1 by tau. 1 by tau will be the Palmer frequency, isn't it? So how we can plot? We can first find out the Palmer frequency. So tau omega should be equal to 1. So this is the point of Palmer frequency. So up to this I will have a low frequency asymptote, and from this particular point I will have a high frequency asymptote with a slope of minus. That's it. Alright? Okay. Once we have drawn these low frequency asymptote and high frequency asymptote, then we can draw a root locus. We can draw a Bode plot approximately around this particular asymptote. Now the interesting point here is, unlike a first order process, in a second order process, in some cases you have a Bode plot with a maximum like this. It's not following a line like this. So you can see that these lines are only when the zeta value, which is nothing but the damping factor value, is when the damping factor value is greater than 0.707, then I get a Bode plot without maximum. So it is not exceeding the value of 1. So Bode plot exceeds the value of AR by Kp equals to 1 when my zeta value is less than 0.707. In the book it is mentioned 1. In the book there is wrongly mentioned. In your book there is wrongly mentioned. This value should be 0.707, not 1. Okay. In fact, that was one of the questions I have asked in my earlier examination. Prove that the minimum value of the zeta for maxima is 0.707. Okay, that is what one of the question I have asked. Now another important thing, whatever the frequency corresponding to this maximum here is, that particular frequency is referred as resonant frequency. Remember I said there are different types of frequencies. So there is a corner frequency which is corresponding to this point, but the point corresponding to the maxima here is a resonant frequency, called as resonant frequency. Okay. So we can prove that when the zeta value is less than 0.707, only in that case you will get a maxima. Only in that case you will get the amplitude ratio value more than 1. Otherwise, you will not get AR by Kp value more than 1. Most of the time AR by Kp is less. Okay. So that was one of the proofs which I have asked in my earlier examination. So let's look at that particular proof again here. Remember, this is the, okay, we have to prove that the resonant frequency is given by 1 minus 2 zeta square by tau. This is what we have to prove. How we can prove? AR by Kp given by this particular expression. Isn't it? What I am interested in finding? I am interested in finding the location of maximum. So I have to differentiate AR by Kp with respect to tau omega, because tau omega is varying along the x-axis, isn't it? So in this particular case, AR by Kp, if I find out AR by Kp, d AR by Kp by d tau omega, and we can put this tau omega equals to x, what I am going to get? D by dx equals to 1 minus x square whole square plus 4 zeta square x square raised to the power minus 1 by. I can differentiate this. After differentiating, this is what we have obtained. If you rearrange everything, what you get is 1 minus x square comes out to be 2 zeta square. If you rearrange. And if you further rearrange, you will get the resonant frequency omega r given by 1 minus 2 zeta square by tau. Now the question here is, this particular frequency is corresponding to the maximum. I can put this omega r in this particular equation and I can find out AR max by Kp. So that will be the corresponding value of AR by Kp at maximum. Isn't it? Correct. Now the question here is, remember, we are not getting the maximum for all the values of omega. Only few values of omega we are getting the maximum. And in this particular case, when the omega, so see, I cannot have the resonant frequency negative value. So only when the resonant frequency is positive, only in that case you get the peak, otherwise you don't get peak. So what that value will be? That value will be 1 minus 2 zeta square should be greater than equals to 0. So if you put that, what you are going to get? Zeta will be less than 0.707. So this was one of the proof I have asked earlier. Okay, it's not there in your book. In your book, the value mentioned is 1. Okay. All right. Now let's look at the Bode plot for date time. Date time e raised to the power minus cds. Replace s by j omega. E raised to the power minus cd j omega. Isn't it? If you compare that with the standard expression of the complex number, so any standard complex number can be represented in terms of its magnitude and phase angle. So you can find out that the amplitude ratio for a date time comes out to be 1 and the phase angle comes out to be minus cd omega. This is a very interesting point. Why? Because all the first order process, second order process, third order process, when you are finding the phase angle comes out to be tan inverse of something. But in case of date time, there is no tan inverse. It's a just minus Vd omega. And that is very, very important. You will see later that instead of having the tan inverse, actually when you do not have a tan inverse, this particular value Td omega, as the frequency increases, it is monotonically decreasing. Unlike the previous case, look at the first order process. For a second order process, this phase angle approaches to the value of minus 180 in a second order process. In case of a first order process, it is approaching to a value of minus 90. So in both the cases, whenever you are having first order process, second order process, third order process, in a first order process, phase angle approaches to minus 90. In a second order process, the phase angle approaches to minus 180. In a third order process, it approaches to minus 270. It is approaching to a value of minus 90, minus 180, minus 270 when omega tends to infinity. But unlike these cases, when you are having a date time, like this, your phase angle becomes minus infinity. When omega tends to infinity, your phase angle becomes minus infinity. It is not approaching to some value. It is becoming minus infinity. And in fact, this is particular factor which makes date time a most detrimental factor in looking at the stability of the control system. This is the point why date time is the most detrimental. Okay. All right. Let's look at, let's say we are having n interacting systems in series. So amplitude ratio, so in this case, G of S will be given as G1s, G2s all the way to Gns, and we can replace S by J omega. With that we will have G1 of J omega, G2 of J omega, and that goes all the way to Gn of J omega. Amplitude ratio will be given by multiplication of the individual magnitude. So you will have the amplitude ratio which is nothing but multiplication of all the magnitudes. Whereas the phase angle is actually added because it is given in exponential terms. So phase angle in this case will be phi1 plus phi2 phi, whereas the amplitude ratio is multiplied. Now let's look at a very simple example, then you will appreciate. Okay, how it works. Let's say you are having a transfer function of the process is 1 upon 2s plus 1 and transfer function of the second process is 6 divided by 5s plus 1. Okay. Now what will be the overall transfer function? Both these processes are in series. So I have to multiply their individual transfer function. So that will give me 1 upon 2s plus 1 and into 6 divided by 5s plus 1. I wanted to draw a Bode plot. So now how to draw a Bode plot? Look at the first process. This is the first process. 1 upon tau s plus 1. Isn't it? 1 upon tau s plus 1. That is what the equation is. Correct. So what will be the Farmer frequency in this case? 1 by tau. 1 by tau will be the Farmer frequency. So what will be 1 by tau? 1 by 2. So that will be 0.5. So this will be, in this case you can see that 1 by tau, that is 1 by 2, that is 0.5. So 0.5 is this is the 0.5. So this is the point which is the Farmer frequency point for the first process. So if I have to draw for the first process, I will have a low frequency asymptote for the first process up to this, and then the high frequency asymptote will have a slope of -1 from this point on. Okay. Now look at the second process. Second process is again 6 divided by 5s plus 1. What will be the Farmer frequency? 1 by 5. So that will be 0.2. Again I can find out that point. This is the second point. So I will have for the second process, I will have a low frequency asymptote up to this and the high frequency asymptote from this point onward. And this high frequency asymptote with a slope of -1 will continue up to this point where this second process becomes active. The point at which this second process is becoming active, at this point the slope becomes -2. So my overall Bode plot will be touching all these asymptotes. So you can see that it is starting from 1. Here the slope is -1, but then towards the end the slope is becoming -2. Okay. So this will be amplitude ratio. AR here Kp is 6. So AR by 6 is plotted versus omega. This will be the first plot. What about the second plot? Second plot again the phase angle. Okay. For this first process, at the Farmer frequency, at the corner frequency my phase angle becomes minus 45. So here it is minus 45. For this first process again here it is minus 45. So their resultant is going to be if I look at this particular point here. So you can see that their resultant is going to become minus 90. Okay, so you have to draw a phase angle plot as a resultant of both the plots. Okay, is it clear? समझ में आ रहा है नहीं समझ में आ रहा है कि सब कुछ ऊपर से जा रहा है मतलब I can sense just by looking at your face I can figure out whether you are able to get or whether you are not able to get. ऐसा लग रहा है कि सब लोग disinterested है ऐसा कुछ है? It seems like people are disinterested. They are not at all interested in going through what only I am enriching myself. Okay. Remember this course I am teaching now 7th time. And more or less all these expressions I am kind of remembering because earlier I used to teach on blackboard. So mostly I remember these expressions. So there is nothing for me. I have done it several times. Okay. Not just this, beyond this also we have done. Even I have done this advanced process control for 2-3 years. So there is nothing new for me. But it is all new for us. Okay, so please pay attention even though it's slightly more mathematical though, but you all are JEE. I am expecting good mathematical skills, at least better than mine, isn't it? Correct? And it is a really interesting topic. I don't know why people are not interested. Is it because that it is becoming too much, too early? If it is becoming too much too early, I am extremely sorry for that. But nothing we can do because we have to anyway make up 2 classes. Right? I request all the students to please go through the material. Otherwise you will be lost. And I can tell you this is one of the most important topic in the process control. Stability and analyzing the stability in frequency. Not just interesting in terms of process control, but also overall also you will find the application of this everywhere. Okay. I don't know how many of you are have you looked at making the robots and all. In those, what type of controlling robots people use? Okay, let's start from there. What type of controller people use in robots? PID. Why not only proportional? Why PID? All are connected. So see, you are not worrying about the oscillations. You wanted to reach to the ultimate response as fast as possible, isn't it? Correct. So that's why you kind of use a PI controller or PID controller. Proportional controller will what? It will always give you an offset. It will not reach to the ultimate value at all. There are several interesting applications of this, and that is why I am asking you to pay attention. Even though it is becoming more or less mathematical now, but I think we have gone through a sufficient amount of discussion and physics of the problem earlier, isn't it? That's why we are now dealing with mathematics. We have gone far from that initial discussion and built all this entire mathematical expression. Correct? So now I am using these transfer functions directly because I am expecting all of you to know what is transfer function. Isn't it? But if somebody is getting lost in those, then I can only request people to please go through. Please go through. Don't just be complacent. That you will be able to do it directly in the examination or even examination are not important. Why we are only concentrating on examination? And I know how people score in the examination. Then I keep on saying this. Getting marks in IIT is a skill more than intelligence. आप मटेरियल कैसे जुगाड़ते हो वो इम्पोर्टेंट, ठीक है? It's a skill, not intelligence. Okay. So if you are not getting marks, don't worry. There are many people who don't get marks, but they have done really well in life. In fact, those who don't get marks, they do well in life. But that doesn't mean that you do not study, isn't it? देखो अल्टीमेटली ये रेस है, है कछुए और क्या बोलते हैं खरगोश के बीच। जीतेगा वही जो लगा है, ठीक है, रेस वही जीतेगा जो लगा है, ठीक है। whoever is putting the effort he will win ultimately, ठीक है। Okay, let's go back. We do not have a time for philosophy. Okay, anyway, so what I am trying to say is you can draw this entire body plot easily. Just the first step what we have to do is first find out the corner. Corresponding to the corner point, then draw a low frequency asymptote hypothesis, and then draw a resultant of the asymptote, and then draw the corresponding point. That is what the entire discussion of this entire slide is this. This is how you can draw the body plot easily. Okay, alright. Let's move to the another. Now let's look at the controller. Proportional controller. What is the transfer function? GC is given as KC. Amplitude ratio comes out with as KC. Phase angle 0. Phase angle 0. So drawing a body plot is very easy. AR is given as just KC as frequency varies. Remember here the x-axis is frequency, and the phase angle again it stays at the value of 0. Let's look at slightly more complicated. PI controller. Now PI controller is slightly more complex. Okay. So in PI controller, the expression is Kc1 plus 1 upon tau is. Yes, I can replace by j omega, and then I can find out the g of j omega, magnitude of that will give me amplitude. So amplitude ratio comes out to be Kc under root 1 plus 1 upon omega tau y square. Okay. Now in this particular case, again the phase angle comes out to be tan inverse of minus 1 upon omega tau y. I can put omega tends to 0. If I put omega tends to 0, this particular factor is becoming dominant. And in that case, you will have a slope of minus 1. And when omega tends to infinity, in that case, this first factor is going to be dominant. So in that case, the high frequency asymptote will be a straight line with amplitude ratio equals to 1. Okay, reverse of the first order. In other words. Okay. Similarly, phase angle. Tan inverse of minus omega minus 1 by omega tau y. When I am putting omega equals to 0, then I am getting tan inverse of minus infinity. So I will have minus 90. So I will be starting from minus 90 when omega is 0. And when omega tends to infinity, then my phase angle becomes 0. Isn't that what is shown here? It is starting with a slope of minus 1 and then approaching to a value of 1. And the phase angle is starting from minus 90 and settling to a value of 0. Let's look at another case which is a PD controller. Proportional derivative controller. Proportional derivative controller will have equation which is given as Kc1 plus tau. Yes, I can replace this by j omega, and again I can find out amplitude ratio. Amplitude ratio in this case comes out to be Kc under root 1 plus omega square tau d square. In this particular case also the low frequency asymptote will start from 1. Low frequency asymptote will start from 1 and the high frequency asymptote will have a slope of plus 1. Plus 1 is very important. Remember in all the other cases it was minus 1, minus 2, etc. Here first time we are getting plus 1. So plus 1 means what? You are kind of anticipating in future, and that is what is shown in the phase angle also. See, phase angle is starting from 0 and it is approaching to plus 90. In all other cases the phase angle was negative. Here the phase angle is positive. So whenever you are having a derivative controller, you are actually anticipating your future. That is what we are getting from this figure. Okay. In PID controller, low frequency asymptote will start with minus 1. High frequency asymptote will go as a plus 1 because of derivative action, isn't it? And in between it will be approaching to a value of 1. Because my amplitude ratio is given by what? Kc under root tau d omega minus 1 upon tau y omega whole square plus 1, isn't it? So depending on whether omega is tends to and based on that we get a -1 or +1 score. Isn't it? When omega tends to 0 in that case omega tends to 0 in that case, this term is going to be dominating and my slope will be -1. And when omega tends to infinity, I am going to get slope equals to 1. Similarly, the phase angle will start from -90 and it will reach to +90. Okay. So you can draw the 4-day plots for all these typical processes like first order process, second order process, third order process, controllers, etc. And you can plot it. We will look at another important plot in the next class, which is a Nyquist plot. Okay. So there are only 2 topics remaining now: the Nyquist plot and designing of the controller using differentiation. So we will require 1 class on the Friday and most probably 1 or 2 classes in the next week. There are some more topics like feed-forward controller, inferential controller, etc. that probably if we get a time we will cover, but those topics will not be a part of your examination. Only up to the frequency response and designing of the controller using frequency response will be a part of your examination. Okay? Alright? Okay, let us stop here and we will continue. Please go through all these slides I am going to put in the scoop today. Please get it from the school and that all this material, most of the material is getting examination is on Sunday.
तुम्हारी नहीं समझ रही हमें। मेरे कहने का मतलब ये है गलत तो गलत है,
नहीं वो बात ठीक है।
अपनी के तुम्हारी तो कोई मतलब नहीं, ये तो भाई कर रहे हैं तो यही मुझे रोटी है।
यूज हो रहा था
सैटरडे चलोगे ना सेंटर
सैटरडे
शाम को
क्या है सैटरडे कुछ है
फैमिली के साथ
कुछ है
वहाँ पे एक होता है ना कि भोग होता है ठीक है योग करते हैं फिर भोग खिलाते हैं सबको
अच्छा अच्छा योग भी होता है वही सी भाई
मन की शांति मिलेगी आपको अभी यकीन होने में टाइम लगेगा प्रॉब्लम क्या है ना भगवान को अगर किसान चला रहे हैं तो करंट देता है अंदर आत्मा में अभी तभी दे सकता है जब आपकी आत्मा थोड़ी सी छूट जाए पूरी अभी बहुत गंदी है उन्हें 10 मिनट में डर है
मैं कह रहा हूँ वहीं उसी रूम में वहीं करेंगे सब कुछ या बाहर कुछ लगाएंगे
वो कहीं
काफ़ी लोग होते हैं वहाँ पे तो कैसे करते हैं
कहीं बार मैं सेवा करता हूँ खाना वाना वहाँ
खुद बनाओगे
Next one is Atishay Goyal.
अतिशय गोड
Thank you.